Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. There's always these accounts of Putin having body doubles who crop up here and there. And to be honest, this is a riskier than usual trip for someone who still feels the need to sit at the end of very long tables in case people cough the wrong germs on him.
Mm.
But nonetheless, what I did notice from the TV footage was that at some point, Putin, or the person who looked like Putin, was clearly limping. And again, one tends to assume that his body doubles would probably be fitter than he is. So,
Yes.
look, we don't know for sure, but at the moment, we will work on the assumption that it was him.
Okay, and we don't know when it happened either, do we? We've been told about it today, but it could have happened last week.
It could. Again, I mean, there's a lot of people who are now desperately scouring over sort of Putin's other activities to try and find if there was a Kherson and Lugansk shaped gap in his schedule. The thing is, though, nowadays, that actually he does so little in terms of visible politics that he could easily have done this. And so I think from this point of view, given the security dimension, there is an assumption that quite possibly it was done earlier and only released now when he's safely out of theatre.
Okay, got you. So who is it for?
I mean, I think it's for two things. One is, I mean, primarily it's for a domestic audience to show that the commander in chief is willing to go to the front lines and he's sort of dedicated to going and meeting the troops and such like. Because the fact of the matter is that in recent years, certainly since COVID, he has not been anywhere near, as I mentioned, as active and as visible as before. And people had noticed this. So I think this is a belated trip to the front. You know, bear in mind, compare that with Zelensky, who is pretty much in a dangerous situation, it seems, every fortnight.
Mm.
So that's the first reason. The second one is, though, actually, it's also to the West. He's trying to underscore his commitment to these territories that have been annexed wholly illegally, and most of them, frankly, are not even in Russian control. But nonetheless, he's still trying to say, actually, no, as far as we're concerned, these are Russian territories, and you're going to have to cope with that.
And what are we to make of the presence of a man called General Taplinsky? Now, he at one point had been removed from his duties. Now he appears to be back. What does that tell you, Mark?
Yeah, there's such a rarity of, or paucity rather, of able Russian commanders that they do seem to be playing musical chairs quite often. I mean, he had fallen out of favor in part because his paratroopers hadn't been able to achieve the results that Putin felt that they should, but also in part because I think he was probably a little bit too acerbic in his own comments about the weaknesses of Russian strategy.
Mm.
But as I say, I mean, there aren't enough good quality, particularly well respected officers within the Russian high command. So it was almost inevitable that he would come back. And particularly, we see his paratroopers at the moment very much playing a key role in the struggle for Bakhmut, which is the main battle area at the moment. So again, I think it shows the degree to which actually there is a very short bench of able officers on which Putin can draw.
Right. Now, President Zelensky of Ukraine has reacted as we might expect him to. He's condemned the visit, saying that Putin is there to enjoy the crimes of his minions for the last time. But I think it's fair to say that there is no obvious end to this war in sight, is there?
No, and this is one of the interesting and sobering elements of the huge trove of secret and top secret American documents that the leak came to light last week. In that, I mean, it is pretty clear that even the Americans are actually looking increasingly downbeat about what they reckon to be the Ukrainians' sort of
Mm.
likely prospects in this spring and summer. Now, look, the Ukrainians have surprised us as well as the Russians in the past, so we certainly can't rule out some unexpected successful campaign. But nonetheless, I mean, certainly everything that Putin is trying to do is to emphasize this sense of this is going to be a long war. I mean, he's metaphorically just simply sitting back and saying, I can keep this up as long as you can. Are you really willing to basically spend not just thousands of lives, but also billions of pounds, euros, and dollars every month to keep this war going?
It's such a depressing picture, certainly the one that you paint, Mark. I mean, and we were also often told that Putin is in a vulnerable position, that there's no guarantee at all that he'll be there in 6 months' time. But what do you sense? I mean, is it possible that one morning we'll wake up to hear a completely different message from a completely different person at the Kremlin?
I mean, I would dearly love to think so, but I'm going to continue what seems to be my role this evening is precisely to be the voice of depression.
Yeah.
Look, as someone who is, I mean, I'm formally barred from going to Russia, and I reckon that I'm essentially going to have to outlive Putin if I ever want to return there. But I think what we're actually seeing at the moment is that I think Putin is not under any imminent threat. He still has the control of the security apparatus, which is crucial. But in some ways, his system is getting hollowed out. He's losing the legitimacy of the masses. He's losing the huge amounts of money he used to have that he could throw at problems. And he's also beginning to lose the capacity to draw on the security apparatus for support. Now, in the normal scheme of things, he can get by with that. But when there is some kind of a crisis, and some sort of crisis will happen at some point because it always does, whether it's a massive Ukrainian breakthrough of the Russian lines or a cascading economic collapse at home, whatever happens, that's, I think, the point when push will have come to shove, and a lot of people will be suddenly making tough decisions about whether or not they really want to go down with Putin or whether or not it's time for someone else. But as I said, I think we're waiting for that kind of black swan to really sort of flutter down.
Briefly, if you can, Mark, isn't it just the unpalatable truth that Ukraine cannot win this war?
Ukraine can win this war, but
Really?
unfortunately, it can't win it quickly. I mean, look, this is very much it's a cliche. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It can outweight and outlast the Russians, but it will be at a terrible cost. There's no way of getting around that.